So I've been doing a little bit of market research recently. I've been going on TikTok, I've been seeing what psychological thrillers everyone's talking about. I went on Instagram, I asked you guys like what are the best psychological thrillers. I've been on Goodreads, I've seen which ones have the highest reviews, the most rave reviews, and I decided to read 6 of them. I literally have a list of about 50 psychological thrillers that I could have read for this video, but in the end I just read the ones which sounded the most interesting to me, because whilst I do make videos for the internet, I make book reviews for the internet, I also kind of want to enjoy the books I'm reading. However, spoiler alert, that did not happen. I read some truly awful books in my pursuit of making this video. So here we go. I read 6 of the internet's most raved about psychological thriller books, and here are my reviews. For each of these books, I'm going to be giving you my star rating, and then we are ranking it by 3 categories. We have got page turning, like how much do I want to pick this book up? Like when I put it down, am I just leaving it there, or am I like itching to pick it up again? Like how fast am I reading this? Number 2 is heart rate, like did it have my heart going? And number 3 is gore levels, which to be fair, I can take or leave a book with gore. I know some people really like it, some people don't. I'm a bit indifferent, like probably rather it wasn't there, but I don't really care. But I know that is a big factor when people are choosing what they want to read, so gore levels. The first book we're going to be talking about is a book that I'm sure everyone has seen online somewhere at this point. Like everyone is raving about this book, and that is The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. I went in with like skepticism with this one. Like when a book is so highly raved about, I usually don't like it, especially in the thriller realm. I can't really tell you why, but if a book's raved about, then I always find something to dislike about it. But I gave this one a solid 4 stars, like maybe even 4.5 stars. Our main character in The Housemaid is a woman called Millie, and she's recently been released from prison. You don't find out why she was in prison until quite a decent way through the book. And Millie, having just been released from prison, she can't really get a job anywhere, she can't find anywhere to stay, she's living out of her car, like she's really, really struggling. And then she comes across an advert for a job as a housemaid in like this very fancy part of town. So she dresses herself up and goes to basically interview for this housemaid position, and she ends up getting it, like kind of no questions asked, like she's just given this job. It's a live-in housemaid position. She is given the bedroom in the attic, and as soon as they go up there, like she notices some very weird things, like the fact there's a lock on the outside of the door, not on the inside. There also seems to be like scratch marks on the wall, but like she's in a very desperate situation. She needs a job. She just decides to accept it. Like it can't be any worse than prison, right? And her boss, Nina, seems to be a really great woman to begin with. Like she seems to be an okay boss. And then as time goes on, Nina starts acting stranger and stranger. Nina, it turns out, isn't only a very difficult boss, she's also just kind of a bit mentally unwell, it seems, but Millie is so desperate, like she needs to keep this job, so she just kind of goes along with it, whilst Nina is quite obviously gaslighting her every single day. And the only saving grace really is Nina's husband, Andrew. It turns out Millie and Andrew get on really well. Too well, probably. And there's also Nina and Andrew's daughter, who is basically like this creepy Victorian doll who wears all these like white frilly dresses and is just genuinely a really creepy presence in this already weird house. I spent the first half of the book like enjoying it, like it definitely was a page turner, but kind of I knew what the twist was going to be. It was quite obvious what the twist was going to be, I thought. But weirdly, that didn't diminish my enjoyment of it when it actually happens, because when the twist happened, it was just like 10 times more insane than I thought it was going to be. This is where I always struggle, like reviewing mysteries and psychological thrillers on the internet, because it's so hard to review these books without giving away the twists and the turns and like what happens. Like I can't say anything. I can't say like really what I really enjoyed about the twist because it would just give it away. But trust me, a lot of these reviews are just going to be like on a trust me basis. I thought Freida McFadden did suspense really well in this book. Like, even though I kind of knew what was going to happen, like with every page I was turning, I was like, is it going to happen yet? Is it going to happen yet? Like, I was just waiting and I was so excited to see like how it all went down, and I really, really enjoyed that. I know this book's got like a lot of mixed reviews. I think when any book is like super hyped like this one is, you're also going to have the other side of the coin where people are like, this is shit, like it was so bad. I had to DNF it at like 25% so I just couldn't get into it. And that is wild to me. Like, I cannot fathom reading this book and not being absolutely hooked. I really enjoyed the ending of this book. There's like a big reveal, and I think I actually probably would have been quite frustrated by this like big reveal at the end. did I not already know there's a second book in this series? And I think there's also a third book, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think if I didn't know there was a sequel, I would have been like really frustrated. There is nothing that annoys me more in a thriller book than when you go through the entire book and then like the last chapter, the last page, something wild happens which throws everything on its head. And it's like, no, we reached a conclusion already. Like, we got to the end, and now you're throwing this whole other aspect in. Like, no, we're at the end of the book. Like, just let it lie. Like, I need to feel like a book has concluded for me to enjoy it. And it really bothers me in thrillers when it doesn't feel finished. Unless I know there's going to be a sequel. In this case, there is. So let's do our rankings. In terms of page turning, I've given this an 8 out of 10. I read this in 3 sessions, but that's only because I had a lot going on, like I had to keep putting it down. But if I had my way, I would have sat and I would have read this book in one sitting, like easily. It was so gripping. I feel like kind of towards the end it did get a bit monotonous. I was like, okay, it should be wrapping up now, which is why it kind of lost 2 points for me. But for the vast majority of the book, like I could have just sat down and read this in one day, like so easily. For heart rate, I also gave it an 8 out of 10. The first half of the book, not so much. I found the first half of the book a bit frustrating to read. It's very like gaslighty. You don't really know if Millie, the main character, is a reliable narrator or not. You don't really know what's going on. The second half, like when I tell you, I could literally feel my heart going in my chest. It was so tense. And in terms of gore levels, I gave it a 3 out of 10. There isn't really much gore in this one at all. Towards the end, it does get a bit gory, like a bit graphic, but for the vast majority of the book, there's pretty much no gore. Again, can't give you any context as to that gore at the end. It's quite graphic. Maybe I should up it. Maybe it'd be like a 4 out of 10, but 8 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 4 out of 10. Fantastic book. The second book I read for this video was No Exit by Taylor Adams, and I gave this one a very solid, I think, 3 stars. I actually sat in the bath. I downloaded this on Kindle. I sat in the bath. I read the first 25% of this, like literally in the bath in like 45 minutes. I was devouring it. Like I literally got out of the bath and I said to Holly, my fiance, I was like, this book is incredible. Like I'm going to finish this in like the next 2 hours. It is so good. And then I sat in bed and read the next 10% and it lost me. It lost me so hard. This started off so strong. So our main character is a woman called Darby. She's a college student and she is going home for the holidays. And to get home, she has to basically drive through the Denver, I think, mountains. Only, of course, there's a massive snowstorm happening and Darby gets stuck in the snowstorm and ends up having to stop at a rest stop where she's just like, okay, we'll wait the storm out and then I will continue on my journey. And when she gets to the rest stop, it's like this like big like mountain cabin, like service station, I guess, in the middle of the mountain. There's 5 other people in there. Actually, now I'm counting it in my head, I think it was only 4 people, unless I'm missing a character. I can't really remember. That's the annoying thing about like reading on my Kindle. Like I always read thrillers on my Kindle. I don't know why, but I rarely ever actually pick up physical copies of thriller books. I only ever read them on my Kindle. There's some sort of psychology there. I don't really know what it is, but it means I can't flick through it and tell you right now how many characters there are. But I think there's like 5 or 6 of them stuck in this random, it's like a triangle building in the mountain. I remember that really clearly. It's a locked in mystery. It was a bit unbelievable in that none of them had working phones at all. Like I get you're in the mountains, but also like there's no Wi-Fi. None of them had any like chargers on them. Like not a single person had their charger. Really, not anywhere at this rest stop was like anywhere they could contact the outside world. Like they were just like immediately cut off. I know it's a blizzard and I know it's a book. Like there's got to be like, you got to suspend some belief. But I was kind of like, it's the 2020s. There must be some form of contact here. So they're all locked in this rest stop thing, and then Darby goes out to basically see if she can get any signal, and when she does so, she comes across the van of one of the other people there and finds a kidnapped child in the van. And from then on, it becomes Darby's mission to A, save this kidnapped child, but also B, like figure out whose van it is that the child is in, because she can't ask for help from the other people because one of them is a kidnapper and just like an all-round terrible person. So for the first like 40% of this book, you're trying to figure out who this van belonged to, and then you find out, and you find out so early, like you find out who the villain is so early, that I feel like as soon as you find out, you kind of lose something in it. Also, the villain, oh, should I say this? Is this spoiler? I think it's quite obvious who the villain is as soon as you go into the book. This is a very specific reference, so if you get this reference, then fantastic. There's an episode of The Simpsons, one of the Halloween episodes. Was it even a Halloween episode? Was it a regular episode? That I watched when I was like probably 8 or 9 years old, and it's about the killer babysitter. There's like a babysitter that comes and tries to kill Bart and Lisa. And that episode of The Simpsons still gives me nightmares to this very day. Like, I can't even think about it without it weirding me out. And the villain in No Exit, like the kidnapper, is described so similarly to the killer babysitter in The Simpsons that I literally, like, it made me so uncomfortable, which is such, like, a niche reference and such a personal thing. But I really struggled with it. But perhaps that says something about Taylor Adams' writing, because it made me feel something, like, so viscerally. I think if you're a fan of the thriller over the mystery element in psychological thrillers, then you'll probably really, really enjoy this. As somebody who is probably more of a mystery lover over the thriller aspect, I think that's why I kind of like fell off with this book. Also, when it's just like one location, you're just like at this rest stop surrounded by snow and trees, it gets a bit repetitive, like it's all the same thing. And that's definitely one of the reasons why I quite quickly lost this book. Like, the storyline was intriguing, but after we'd already found out who the bad guy was and who the kid was and what was going on, and the only motivation now was to try and escape, I just didn't really care anymore. Like, I wish the mystery of, like, who the killer was or who the abductor was, kidnapper was, had gone on for more of the book than what it did. Because after that, you're just trying to escape, and then it fails, and they try to escape again, and it fails, and they try again, and it fails. Then the ending I thought was really convoluted as well. Like, there could have been a million ways this book could end. And the way it all came together, I thought was so convoluted and so weird. Like, yes, again, I know we're writing a book. I know it's got to be gripping for the reader. I know you're trying to, like, throw in twists that nobody's really seen before. But I just thought it was a little bit unbelievable. Too unbelievable. So in terms of page turning for No Exit by Taylor Adams, I gave this one a 4 out of 10. The first, like I said, 30%, 25% had me so hooked. I read it so quickly, and then after that it just got very repetitive. I just didn't have like the want to pick it up and finish it. The last 20% was such a slog. I felt like it could have finished probably about 50 pages earlier than it did. However, I will give the heart rate a 7 out of 10 because there were parts of this where my heart was literally beating out of my chest, but probably because of the killer babysitter comparisons that I just could not stop thinking about. Still, even thinking about it now is making me so uncomfortable. Like, I don't even think I can put a picture of the babysitter on this screen because that involves Googling it. Like, I can't even put the reference up because I don't want to Google it and I don't want to look at it because I will have a nightmare tonight. And for gore levels, I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. This was so gory at parts. There's one part, like towards the end of the book, that is so incredibly graphic that I literally had to put the book down and I was like, I can't. And I actually think I skipped over the rest of that page. It made me so uncomfortable. It involved a hand and skin and no. But if you like gore, you will probably like this one. All these reviews are very subjective. They're very personal to me. Like I said, I like the mystery. I like the thriller, obviously, but it's got to have an element of mystery for me to like really want to turn those pages. This one just didn't really have that. But let's move on to talking about Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I read another one of Alice Feeney's books not too long ago. I think it was called Sometimes I Lie, if I remember correctly. And I did not like it. I hated it. And in response, loads of people told me that I should read Rock, Paper, Scissors. Like, everyone told me I'd enjoy this one so much more. You were all liars. You're liars. I gave this one 2.5 stars. This one was such a struggle. Like, I really, really struggled to get through this one. And I do think if I wasn't making this video, I probably would have DNF'd it because I'm trying to be a lot better with my DNFs. I think one of my main problems with this book was the unreliable narrator trope. I just never really enjoyed that trope in general. But in this book, you are dealing with a married couple whose name I have written down here, Adam and Amelia. Adam suffers with face blindness, so he like can't recognise people when they come up to him, which plays a big part in this book in general, and that it just makes him very unreliable. So you just immediately from the get-go, you don't trust anything that's going on in this book. Adam and Amelia are going through a very rough patch in their marriage. Like, they can't really see eye to eye on anything at all, and in a very last-ditch attempt to try and fix whatever's going on with them, they decide to go up to the Scottish Highlands for the weekend, where they are staying in an old deserted chapel. Immediately, very, very creepy. Only it's made very clear from the beginning of the book that both of them have something planned, which means the weekend isn't going to end in both of them coming home. But I'm a bit confused because that never really came to full fruition in the book. Like, it's very hinted about in the early pages. And again, can't spoil it, can't tell you what happens. But I don't think they both had a plan. I can't really remember, but I remember finishing the book and I was like, oh, but what about that? That didn't really make sense. So in this book, you've got dual point of views, you've got Adam and Amelia's point of views, and then you've also got separate chapters in which the wife is writing to the husband letters on each of their anniversaries. So it's sort of like you follow the whole marriage through these letters. And in each letter, it sort of goes through what they've been through in the last year, what's going on, like how happy they are, like is there anything that needs changing in their marriage? And as the years go by, you see her getting increasingly unhappy with what's going on. Adam is a screenwriter and his entire life is just like about writing his shows, and like he just wants to be big in Hollywood. He wants to write these really big shows, and he kind of like abandons his wife in that process. Although of course that's just from her point of view, so that's how she is seeing their marriage. I think in general, I'm never the biggest fan of domestic thrillers. Like, so often I'm just like, can you just go to therapy and sort out your issues? Like, why are you making it into such a thing? Just like sort your problems out. It's so heterosexual. I just can never quite get on board with it. This book is not really an exception to that. Like, they could have just divorced, or they could have just like separated or gone to therapy, and all of their issues could have been fixed. The only like really creepy thing about this book I found was the setting. Like, it was a derelict church in like rural Scotland, and it's very creepy, and there's trees making shadows, and there's damp basements, and like they lock each other in. But do they lock each other in? And lights keep going on and off, but is it the other one doing it? Are they just trying to scare each other? Who knows? They took their Labrador Bob with them on this holiday, and honestly the scariest part of this book for me is when Bob goes missing. Like, that was genuinely quite harrowing for me. I don't like it when animals get involved in these things. Like, I just feel really, really sad. But generally I just didn't find this book creepy and or enjoyable. I really didn't. So in terms of page turning, I gave this a 2 out of 10. Like I said, an absolute slog. If it wasn't for this video, I probably wouldn't have finished it. In terms of heart rate, I gave it a 3 out of 10, and that got a point added on because my heart rate was up when poor Bob went missing. And gore levels, like a 1 out of 10. Nothing really gory about this one at all. But if you thought that was going to be the worst one of this video, you were sorely mistaken, because by far the worst book out of all these 6 I read was The One by John Mars. Oh my god, The One was not the one. It was not the one at all. I gave this a very generous 2 stars. In writing my review for this last night, I actually think I bumped it down to like 1.5 stars. And even then I still think that's probably being generous. This is a very loose description of a thriller. I do not see at all how this came under the sort of umbrella of a thriller book. Like, a fiction book was probably like more likely. There is a serial killer. Like, it's got 6 different characters, like 6 different point of views that you're switching through constantly, which is just like a whole other kettle of fish. Like, I don't like it when there's that many characters, like point of views in a book. One of them is a serial killer, but even then it's not really creepy because you know who the serial killer is. Like, you know, you're inside his head, so he's not a threat. It's just not a thriller. Like, baseline for this video is not a thriller. And I should have realised before reading this, and I just didn't, that I actually watched the TV show of this. There's a TV show on Netflix called The One, and I didn't realise until I'd started reading this book that it was the same as the TV show. I hated the TV show, so I should have known I was going to hate this, but I didn't realise. I didn't know they were the same one. This is a world in which a scientist called Ellie has discovered a gene within everyone's DNA which links them to one other person on Earth, and that one other person is your one true match, your soulmate, like your biological genetic soulmate. And it's said as soon as you meet this person, you just have this undeniable connection, like your hearts, your souls are linked in that moment. And so Ellie has kind of like eliminated the world of dating, like the world of trying to trawl through and find this person you connect with, because you just take this DNA test and it matches you with your one person and that's it. The book does cover some like questionable things. Oh, I've got something in my eye. Ow. As I was saying, the book does cover some questionable things, like some questions the audience might have in terms of like, what if there's a big age gap between couples? And it's kind of like, well, they're your one true match, so it doesn't really matter. So it's kind of like removed stigma over things like that. It was like, oh, what if your match is like a child? And it's like, well, you got to wait until they turn 18. But even then, it is a bit creepy. There's this whole thing over like same-sex couples. So sometimes your match will be somebody of the same gender as you, but you have always identified as a straight person. And it's like, oh yeah, we've removed homophobia and racism, and we've just connected people everywhere because their one true match could be somebody from anywhere in the world. One question I did have that wasn't answered is, what if your one true match was like somewhere in history? Like, what's the chance that your one match is like alive here and now? Like, out of all the billions of people that lived, like, surely it might be in history, but then it's just like, okay, kind of, you're screwed. Like, what are you going to do then? So in the one, you're following these 6 different people as they're at sort of like different stages of their matching journey. Like, some of them are like debating whether they should get matched. They're already in relationships and they're like, should I, shouldn't I? Like, should we find out if we're like meant for each other? One of the point of views is Ellie, who is the scientist. One of the point of views is a serial killer called Christopher, who like identifies as a sociopath, not identifies, is a sociopath. And he like doesn't really believe in it, but he does it anyway, and he does meet his match. There's one woman called Jade whose match is like the other side of the world in Australia, and so she flies to Australia to meet her match. It's fascinating, it's a really interesting concept, but it's just a shame that John Mars executed it so poorly. For a book where so many of the main characters, like so many of the point of views, were women? I said that really weird. Were women? I've forgotten how to speak. John Mars can't write female characters. He just can't. Like, they were all so one-dimensional, and actually, like, there were points in this book where I was actually quite offended. Like, he uses the word whore at one point, which, like, just like in the context that it was in, really bothered me. Like, I did not like it at all. Like, it felt like personal. I just didn't like it. All of the women, none of them have done anything wrong. Like, they're all just like women just trying to find their place in this world, trying to find their loves, and they are vilified in this book. Like, they are treated like they are idiots and they're awful and horrible people. Whereas 2 of the main male characters in this book are genuinely like criminals, villains, horrible people. And as the reader, you're like told to have sympathy for them. Like, one of them, Christopher, is literally a serial killer, and you walk away feeling bad for him. You feel bad for him. Whereas Jade, who like goes to the other side of the world to find her match, she is portrayed as the villain. Like, it really bothered me. There's also a very one-dimensional gay character in this, or he's not even a gay character. He was in a relationship with a woman and then does the DNA test and finds himself matched to a man, and it's about like his relationship with this man. But it's so like, meh. Like, are you not going to explore that further? It just like, there's no exploration of his feelings around this and like how they're going to make this work and like what it means for like community and things like that. It's just, it was so one-dimensional. Like, everything about it was just so thoughtless, and you could tell that it was written by a straight man. Like, it is so obvious. I don't even need to Google it. I'm going to Google it right now, and I can guarantee to you that John Mars is a straight man. Let's find out. Okay, I can't find out if he's a straight man or not, but I can guarantee you he is. He is, because no gay man would write a gay relationship with so little thought and care. It just really bothered me. Like I said, this is such an interesting premise, and there are so many things that could have been done with this, but the whole book just felt so shallow. Like, no thought was put into it at all. It really bothered me. So let's do our rankings. Page turning, 1 out of 10. Again, one that I probably would have DNF'd. Like, I probably would have DNF'd it as soon as I opened it and realised that it was going to be the same as the TV show. That should have been my first clue, but again, I wanted to make this video, so I thought through. 1 out of 10. Hated it. Heart rate, again, 1 out of 10. It wasn't a thriller. This book, not a thriller. Nothing thrilling about it. I don't get it. But gore levels, I will say I've given it an 8 out of 10 for gore, because the scenes with the serial killer are very graphic. Like, it describes in details the awful things that he is doing to these women's bodies. Again, like, women being treated as disposable in this book. Like, it really bothered me. Hated it, to the point where I will probably never read John Mars' book again, which is such a shame, because I really enjoyed the last one that I read with him, which was, I can't remember what it was called, wait. What Lies Between Us. I really enjoyed that one, but this book has pissed me off so much that, I don't know, never again. I'm stubborn. But luckily, we don't need to worry about that with our next book. I don't know why I'm using my Coke cans point. Let's put that down, shall we? The next book, I've really enjoyed, one of my favourite books I've read so far this year, and that is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. No, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Tempted to up it. Tempted to give it a full 5 stars. But we'll see what other books I read this year, and we'll slot it in. We'll see where it fits. I just adore any book that includes like multimedia. I feel like I zoom through them every single time, and this book was so good. You've got Alex and Josie, and they turn out to be born on exactly the same day in the same hospital, and their lives cross one day, and they kind of become very intertwined with each other. Alex Summers is a podcast host. She is sort of hosting a really, really popular podcast series, but she's kind of feeling like it's coming to a natural conclusion, it's coming to an end. She's looking for a bit more excitement in her life. Like, her home life isn't great. Her husband keeps like going out and not coming home. He's dealing with like a lot of like alcoholism problems. And so Alex just like looking for something to like make her life exciting. And then she comes across Josie, and Josie's just like a very plain, very kind of like boring woman who's, I think they're both like in their 40s, and Josie is looking to make a massive change in her life. So when their lives cross one day, Josie says to Alex, like, I want you to make a podcast series about my life because I'm about to make some like really big changes. I want to leave my husband. I want to like do all these things, but I want to like share it with the world. Like, I want to talk about why I am the way I am. I want to talk about my childhood, and I want to talk about how I'm making these changes. And Alex is kind of like, you're a bit of a weird woman. Like, I don't like you that much, but I'm intrigued. Sounds like a really good podcast. Let's do it. So they do it. I mean, it's very clear to you as the reader from very early on that something kind of went awry at some point, because the chapters are interspersed with scripts from a Netflix show, like a Netflix documentary. And within the Netflix documentary, you have got clips of this podcast. So in the main chapters, you've kind of got like what's going on here and now, like in the modern time. And in the Netflix parts, you've got Josie telling her story about her past to Alex. And it's very clear from very early on that Josie probably didn't have the best childhood. Like, she went through a lot, and in her adult life, she's just looking for connection. She's looking for somebody to be her friend and to listen to her. Or at least that's what you think, because we are dealing with a very unreliable narrator here. As I said, I usually hate unreliable narrator tropes, but in this book, it kind of makes sense because you know going in that she's odd. Like, that is made very clear from like the get-go. This woman, not really to be trusted, and it just adds a whole other layer to this story because you're trying to unravel what is true, what's not true. Like, what can you believe, what can you not believe? Honestly, I don't really know why this unreliable narrator in particular didn't bother me. It just didn't. Don't know what to say to you. It turns out Josie's husband, who she's been married to for about 20 years, came onto her when she was about 15 and he was in his 30s. So he's a good 20 years older than her. So we are dealing here with a paedophile. And this is a really, really interesting look at like morals, I found this book, because undeniably he is 20 years older than her. Like, that is a massive age gap, and undeniably they did get together when she was a teenager. But also, he's not got the easiest time for either being with her. Again, no spoilers. So it's like a very interesting, like, okay, he's a terrible person, but is she a more terrible person? Like, who's the bad one in this relationship, or is it just all round terrible for everyone involved? And it's really like conflicting, because there's certain points in the book where you're like, oh, poor Walter. And then you're like, no, not poor Walter. Terrible man. Terrible man. But you're living it through Josie's point of view, through her narrative. As a true crime consumer and a true crime podcaster, I suppose you could say myself, like, I make true crime videos on my YouTube channel, but I do also make podcasts. So podcaster, YouTuber, I don't really know. But as a true crime content creator myself, I found this really interesting. I do have like conflicting feelings a lot of the time when it comes to true crime podcasts being featured in books like this, because a lot of the time it feels like they're punching down. But this was just like a really interesting look at it. My voice really cracked then. Let's pretend that didn't happen. It was just a really interesting look at it. It felt very like fair and even-sided. I love this book so much. The chapters are really short and sweet, so you just like, absolutely zoom through it. The like Netflix bits as well, like, really break up the main story. Honestly, I read this one so fast. I could not put this one down. I love Lisa Jewell as an author. Like, everything I've read of Lisa Jewell's, I have really, really enjoyed. And I might actually make a video where I read every single Lisa Jewell book and then rank them. So let me know if you want that, because that sounds like a real good time for me. The ending of this one was very intriguing. It kind of did that thing I was talking about earlier when I was talking about The Housemaid, where it kind of ends on like this open note, which usually I find really, really frustrating. But I do have a feeling, a sneaky, sneaky suspicion, that there could be a sequel to this book. Lisa Jewell has gone back and written sequels to books in the past. The Family Upstairs, great book, great sequel, really enjoyed that. So I do suspect that she might have left this one open for a sequel as well. Fingers crossed, because I would really, really enjoy that. In terms of page turning, this one was 100% a 10 out of 10. I absolutely devoured this. Heart rate, I gave this one a 7 out of 10. Like, in terms of thrillers, it's not the most scary book. Like, you're not reading it and sweating. Like, it's a very slow burn, and then the last 20%, oh my god, so much goes down. Awesome. And then gore levels, I gave this a 3 out of 10. It's really not very gory. Again, last 20%, there was probably some bits in there which were a bit gross, but generally not a very gory book. And the final book I have to talk about today is one that so many of you told me to read. And I'm mad at every single one of you who told me to read this, and that is The Push by Ashley Audrain. I think I probably would have enjoyed this one a lot more if I knew what it was going in. Because this, again, I don't think this comes under the category of thriller. Like a contemporary fiction, maybe, like a look at generational trauma and motherhood. Yeah, maybe I would have been interested in that. I was going in looking for a thriller, and I don't think that's what I found. So in this book, you're following 3, or I suppose even 4 generations of women all in the same family. You've got Etta, who gives birth to Cecilia, who gives birth to Blythe, who gives birth to Violet. And there's this kind of myth running within this family that these women cannot be mothers to daughters. Like, it just doesn't work out well. You've got generation upon generation of mothers who are terrible to their daughters, who just, they're not cut out to be mothers, but they found themselves in these situations and they've just got to deal with the cards that they've got. Our main narrator here is Blythe, and she is happily married to husband Fox, and her and Fox are trying for a baby, and they end up having a daughter called Violet. And as soon as Violet's born, Blythe just doesn't feel that connection to her. She says she looks in her daughter's eyes and just sees darkness, and she is convinced from the day her daughter's born that her daughter is evil. And so a lot of things happen over the years, where it's kind of is it confirmation bias? Is Blythe looking for evil in her daughter, and so she's seeing it? Or is her daughter genuinely evil? And I think that's where the thriller aspect of this book comes in, but still it's not really very thrillery. Because as you go through the book, the relationship with Violet just gets worse and worse and worse, and you end up feeling bad for Violet because it's very clear her mother's always treated her badly, treated her differently, because she deemed her to be evil. At one point, Blythe and Fox have a second child, a son called Sam, and Blythe just adores Sam. Sam is the child she always, always wanted. And then Violet's just there on the sides, just looking in. But is she evil? Is she not evil? We don't know. Blythe also tells the story of her mother, Cecilia, and how Cecilia left at one point, and how she never really had that connection with her. Cecilia just never showed that love and affection and care that Blythe wanted, and now Blythe is replicating that with her own daughter. And then within the book, you've also got these really randomly interspersed chapters about Cecilia and Etta. So Etta is Cecilia's mum, and it goes all the way back to the 60s and talks about how Etta also just was not cut out to be a mother. There's a really graphic scene in it where, it's not really graphic, it's just, it came out of nowhere, I suppose. I was a bit surprised, where Etta ends her own life and Cecilia sees it. And I feel this book probably could have done without those chapters. I don't really think they added much context. I feel the story about Etta could have been sprinkled in by Blythe talking about her own mother, maybe. I don't really know. I didn't really enjoy those chapters very much. I finished this book and really struggled to figure out my exact feelings about it, because I was would I have enjoyed this book more if I wasn't going in thinking it was a thriller? So I read loads, and I mean loads of Goodreads reviews after this, just to try and get my thoughts straight. And I was so concerned at the amount of people being you'll only understand this book if you're a mother. You'll only get it if you're a mother. And I'm do that many mothers resent their children as much as Blythe resented Violet? Because that is all I'm getting from this. If motherhood is that genuinely awful, what are we doing? Girls, what are we doing? Because that is genuinely concerning to me. I don't want to be able to relate to this. It was awful to read. It's really graphic in points. There's a lot of like talk about like nipples and breastfeeding and like genitals. Like you're really trying to like pull on the symbolism of like womanhood. There's one point where it literally talks about like a child, like a little boy's genitals, and that like really, really put me off. Like I did not like that at all. Yeah, mothers, are you okay? Do you need help? Do you need a hug? Do mothers need a hug? Because I think they do. But also, like, if you're thinking those things about your children, I think you need more than a hug. Goodreads mothers, are you okay? Like, this is a mother who sees her daughter as competition. Like, this mother is trying to, like, write her story. She's a writer and just leaves her daughter to scream for hours on end in the cot because she just, like, deems that she's evil, even though she's literally, like, 6 months old. She's like, oh no, she's evil. She can, like, deal with herself. There's one scene in which Fox comes in and they basically end up sleeping together in the shower, and Cecilia's like, oh, thank God he's showing me attention over her. It's like, her's your daughter. She's your daughter. Like, it's not a competition. Like, it's so, oh my God, it's so concerning. If you're a mother yourself and you've read this book and you actually can relate to it, I'll be so intrigued to hear your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, because I don't get it. I feel like maybe I'm just like missing that context. Maybe that's really important to enjoying this book. But I just thought it was so concerning. Also, the ending of this book, I hated it. It did that typical thing I was talking about earlier where you like read the whole book, then in the last chapter it like completely switches everything on its head and then it leaves you doubting yourself. And I'm like, well, now we need another book. Or why are you doing that? Like, I want this book to be concluded. I want it to end. Why are you leaving me with more questions? Hated it. No. And I feel like the ending as well, without giving anything away, very much undermined the point of the story. If it was about like motherhood and generational trauma and like the struggles you go through as mother, I feel like the ending just completely negated all of that. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I mean, in terms of page turning, I gave this one a 3 out of 10. It wasn't like, was it awful? It was kind of awful. I hated the writing in this book. It was so stilted. There were so many like short sentences, like so many full stops are used in this book. Actually, let me read out, because I actually have this one in a physical version. I only ever pick up thrillers in physical versions if they're in a charity shop or if I can get them really cheap on Vinted. Otherwise, I literally just get them on my Kindle. Let me read out the first page here. Okay, I'm going to read you one paragraph. This is one paragraph. I look down to put on my gloves. When I look back up, the girl is standing at your open front door. Her face is half lit by the lantern above your house number. The plate she's holding is stacked with carrots and cookies. You'll leave crumbs on the tile floor of the foyer. You'll play along, and so will she. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences. That is 6 separate sentences in that is like literally that much of a page. I found it so stilted and so difficult to read. It does get a bit easier as you go through the book. You kind of like begin to forget about it. But the first like probably 100 pages, I found it so difficult to get through because it feels like it's written like a child's book. But it's not. This is definitely an adult's book, but it's so stilted and so many sentences. Like, what's wrong with a comma, people? Use a comma now and then. Jeez. Heart rate, I gave it 2 out of 10, and that's only because of like the very last bit that does get you going a little bit. Other than that, like this isn't a thriller. It's not a thriller. It's really sad, like quite harrowing. Not a thriller. And gore levels, because of the aforementioned suicide scene I mentioned, and a lot of talk of like genitals and like nipples and all stuff like that, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Not saying that nipples and genitals inherently are gory, but like the context in which they're talked about in this book, gave me the ick slight. It gave me the ick slightly, is where I was going with that. It is getting very dark outside, which is very sad because it's only about 3:30. So there you go. There are my probably quite harsh reviews of 6 of the most hyped psychological thrillers online at the moment, and I would only recommend 2 of them. The Housemaid, awesome. None of this is true. Amazing. Really enjoyed that one. The rest you can very much take or leave. I wouldn't recommend them, but hey, you do you, boo. I would be really intrigued to see in the comments recommendations of books that you genuinely think I would enjoy based on what you've heard in this video today. I'd love to make a video about like reading 6 more psychological thrillers, but like the books that you think I would enjoy based on these ones. So let me know, maybe I'll do that. A lot of you have been begging me to make more videos based around thrillers. So here we go. This one is for you guys. Hopefully we have a lot more coming in the future. If you enjoyed this, please make sure you interact with it in any way whatsoever. I'm trying to build this channel as much as I can. I'm trying to get more followers, more likes, more comments, you know, it all helps. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys. Will I ever make a non-awkward outro on this channel? Probably not. I can't do it.